The future of progressive radio. This is the Dean Obadala Show on SiriusXM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're live Wednesday, October 16th. Right now in studio, our friend Julian Zelizer, professor at Princeton University, CNN contributor, author of various books, including one with Kevin Cruz, Fault Lines, a history of the U.S. since '74, which is perfect timing for what's going on right now. So let me ask you, you watched the debate last night, you're obligated to. Let me ask you, do you think was there any game-changing moment for any of the candidates?
No game-changing moment. It is clear that Biden has faded as a frontrunner. I mean, he still polls well, but he was almost non-existent except for that one moment where he defended what his son had done. But he's not part of the conversation. It's very clear to me that Elizabeth Warren is the frontrunner. And even though she was attacked, in some ways that defined her even further as the lead figure on the stage. But there wasn't a game changer. I think these are hard to be game changers when you have that many people and they all have about 30 seconds to say anything.
How did you think objectively Liz Warren responded to all the incoming fire?
Well, she wasn't great. I think she has to get used to that position. I do think she'll have to answer some of these questions about financing. She'll have to decide what she wants to do.
Right.
Be very forthcoming about it or try to be a little bit evasive. Both are strategies, but she's going to have to pick one or the other. I don't think they undercut her. I think she still leaves feeling pretty good. But that's good for candidates. They want to be attacked. If you are the front runner, now's the time to test everything you have.
And for Democrats, we want to nominate a candidate who's going to do well on the general election stage.
Right.
Having her answer, if she ends up being the nominee, whoever it is, answering the tougher questions now makes them stronger, makes them think about the issues, makes them get ready to answer those on the national stage in those debates. Because with Trump, we don't even know what Trump will attack you on because the truth doesn't matter in his attack. So there's no way to prepare. You just want a good candidate who you know is smart, that you agree with, of course, politically, but you know that's smart. And I found it interesting. There was a poll that came out 2 days ago, a CBS poll, asking Democrats, only Democrats, who do you think will respond the best to, I think the term was they used very well to Donald Trump. And Biden, 50%, Bernie, 60%, Liz Warren, 65% of Democrats polled thought she would respond very well to Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I think the polls continue to move in the right direction for her, and she has amassed a pretty formidable organization, but she's very calm on stage. There were moments last night she probably could have answered something more directly, or she was almost taken aback a little bit at moments. But overall, she has a very cool demeanor, and that's exactly what angers Trump the most. That's the photo today with Speaker Pelosi. He wants someone who will engage him the way he engages. And if you don't do that, I think that really frustrates him. And that's part of what Warren is about. She also stands for something. I mean, she has a set of ideas she believes in. And I think that's something you bring to the debate stage that he doesn't have and can excite Democrats.
When there was a lot about the fighting, we covered a great deal about the funding of Medicare for all. Do you think, and I know it's speculative, but do you think Medicare for all could be a winner for the Democrats, or do you think it has more potential to be an albatross around the leading candidate if it's a Bernie or Warren nominee?
I think both. I mean, I do think there is something exciting about the promise of fixing health care. That's why Democrats do come back to that. The system is broken. It is flawed. There's many ways to expand it. And I think there's something attractive to taking a program that exists and saying we will broaden it. The problem is it's been framed now as people will lose something in exchange for that. And this is not Republicans losing something. It's Democrats. That's how some Democrats see it. And so if you are going to champion this, you need to have a way to explain that because that can hurt you. That can alienate you. So I don't think it's an albatross, but it's certainly not an easy, let's just say it again and again and they win.
And we know that the Republican argument will be everything from socialism to it's going to dilute the benefits now for people on Medicare. And the Democrats have to get ready to push back against that very, very quickly because the older people vote in big numbers.
That's right.
And you don't want them to think their Medicare Because even Democrats who get Medicare be like, what? This is going to dilute my Medicare. I don't think they're going to vote for Trump, but they might not vote. They might stay home. I mean, that's part of the concern. Or I think they'd come out and vote. I think the fear of losing Medicare benefits moves people.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. There's a political scientist, Jacob Hacker, and he was the author of The Public Option. Mm-hmm. And he's been involved in this. And I think I read a book of his where he calls it Medicare E for everyone. And same idea that you just add a part to Medicare and that's where everyone else comes in. So part of this is about framing it.
Right.
And the excitement of Medicare for All is it sounds big, it sounds bold, but the cost is that can be scary, especially for older people who depend on this,
Are there any lessons, being a historian that you are, say, we'll go to LBJ, when pushing for Medicare, the actual genesis of what we're talking about now? Clearly on the right, they called it socialism. There's no doubt about it. They called FDR's Social Security socialism. Are there any lessons Democrats can take from that successful battle that they can use in fighting for expanding Medicare?
Sure. The lesson is that the attacks will be the same, whatever they propose. It will be called socialist. It will entail scare tactics about what people are going to lose. That's what happened with Medicare when it was a proposal. But in the end, the president and the Democrats in Congress, along with unions, pushed for it. And they really delivered the message of what the benefit would be in very clear terms to people who were struggling. And so what was radical in 1964 was no longer radical by 65 and 66. And so that's what you remember. Going bold is risky. But it's very easy to imagine a program like this becoming a normal part of the landscape.
I want to play a clip of Bernie Sanders. It's one of my favorite clips in the entire debate because it was about a policy, but it was more about values and vision. And here's clip number 10, please.
Senator Sanders, do you want to respond?
I get a little bit tired, I must say, of people defending a system which is dysfunctional, which is cruel. 87 million uninsured, 30,000 people dying every single year, 500,000 people going bankrupt. For what reason? They came down with cancer. I will tell you what the issue is here. The issue is whether the Democratic Party has the guts to stand up to the healthcare industry, which made $100 billion in profit, whether we have the guts to stand up to the corrupt, price-fixing pharmaceutical industry, which is charging us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And if we don't have the guts to do that, if all we can do is take their money, we should be ashamed of ourselves.
I thought that was a great answer. It's also clear they rebuilt Bernie when he went in. He had a heart attack. He's now the Terminator. He's come out the Burninator. He came out. That was late in the debate. Look all the energy he had.
Yeah, look, that's when Sanders is at his best. He has a clarity about what the problem is and why his solution is good. And he'll say it with an authenticity and a sense of conviction that a lot of the candidates don't have. And that is a great way to package healthcare reform. It is about expanding benefits. There will be costs, but ultimately it's about fixing a system that so many Americans don't like, understand as problematic, and get ripped off by. And so that's an example of what you're asking, how you sell this.
And also his sincerity and authenticity is. I interviewed him last week. We had him on the show, and so he's still recovering, and he's at home. And so I said something. He goes, "That one really gets." I'm like, "Don't." I'm like, "Calm down, Senator Sanders," because we were talking about healthcare issue, and he got instantly just upset. He goes, "That's one of those things that really gets me going." And we were talking. I think we were talking about elder care at the time, and the idea of having dignity for seniors who are retiring and have to burn through all their assets to get Medicaid because people don't realize home health care is not covered by Medicare, like in the case of my mom. So we're talking about that. And I think I think Bernie Sanders has had a bigger impact on where the Democratic Party is today than Barack Obama in terms of policy. I mean, the ACA was Barack Obama. So without the ACA, maybe you couldn't dream of Medicare for all. But on student debt and student free college, pushing for minimum wage increase, and President Obama near the end was pushing for it by a second term. He was, but I think Bernie has really moved this party in a way where, Liz Warren and him are now mainstream in our party. They're not to the left any longer.
No, absolutely. The fact both of them are front runners, co-front runners, whatever you want to call them, is pretty amazing. I mean, go back to the 1990s, it would have been inconceivable when Bill Clinton was defining the party. And the same is true about those Obama years. Obama was pretty cautious, and he still believed Democrats had to veer to a certain set of issues. He was bold, though. I mean, his policies allowed for Sanders to do what he does. But Sanders is just, he's pushed and embraced Democratic values with gusto. And I think for the new generation, for a lot of younger Democrats, that's appealing. Even those who don't totally agree with him, even those who are more moderate, I think they like seeing a Democrat who stands for something and who has ideas about what needs to be done in this country.
And I always wondered if Obama had a true Democratic Senate and House the last few years, what he could have passed and how he could have been the transformative person that I think his instincts were. But as he put it when he was leaving, it's like turning a battleship or an aircraft carrier being president, and how hard and slow it is. And there's so many things that get in your way. And, Trump, who slammed Obama for everything, is done more executive orders, declaring emergencies, trying to get out of it because it is confining for a president because of this thing called Congress.
Right. And the Republicans in Congress are dead set against any big legislative initiatives. If Sanders or Warren are president, they will face a comparable situation still. Yeah. It's not like Senator McConnell will be cheerleading and saying, let's pass lots of stuff. And so part of the debate now really needs to be about what are they actually going to do to get this stuff done. And I think both of them have this vision that they will continue the campaign mobilization as a source of pressure if they are in the Oval Office. And I think there's an argument to be made. That's what needs to be imagined.
And Julian, let me ask you as an historian, as a professor here. I was on earlier talking, and I think I'm accurate here, but Republicans, what they've given people are tax cuts for the wealthy, policy that help the rich, including more subtle things that look more neutral, like rolling back regulations, which in turn help corporations and help their donor class. Democrats have given Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the entire Great Society package of programs, in fact, and the ACA, Children's Health Insurance Program. I cannot think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Republicans in the modern day, not the EPA, which I know that Nixon signed into law, but of a social program that helped the average American. Have the Republicans delivered anything since the 1960s? I mean, maybe Eisenhower signed something, I don't know.
The Americans with Disabilities Act, that was
Eisenhower?
President H.W. Bush.
Okay.
So that's fair to say
Sure.
That's an important civil rights measure.
But it wasn't spending money the same way.
No, it was a regulatory measure.
It's a very good
It
measure.
wasn't money.
Right.
And so I think that's the best example. Republicans have supported the Earned Income Tax Credit, which was pushed by a Southern Democrat, but it was a bipartisan idea. So there's a couple. But in general, if you look at the long history of both parties from the 30s through today, it's very clear that Democrats have been the party pushing spending and regulations to help middle-class Americans much more aggressively than Republicans. And so Republicans can admit that and say that's not what they believe in. But to say they're doing something different, there's only a few examples you really can point to.
We are the party that helps people. See that, folks? All right, let's take a break and come back and talk about, you wrote about foreign policy and how that's going to be a bigger issue, and it is because of Trump's ineptness. It's unreal what's going on. And also I want to talk about, before you came on, Steve Kornacki was showing different polls and how things evolved, but they keep going back to 2004. 2016 is not a little bit of an indicator, but I was looking at years when there was a lot of candidates. And to the second tier or third tier candidates, we're 110 days from Iowa caucus, February 3rd. Is it unrealistic? It's someone at 2% that they're going to be the front runner at some point when we're this far in. So let's come back and talk about that with our friend Julian Zelizer right after this.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
Whoever's the next president, we should call them the 45th president of the United States. And this will go down as a dark time in America that we'll never refer to again.
SiriusXM Progress.
You're listening to the Dean Obeidallah Show, Sirius XM's Progress.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live here Wednesday, October 16th. And Julian Zelizer, we're laughing because on Fox News is Tulsi Gabbard. That's the only place you find Tulsi Gabbard. Now, I know she's angry at some of the other media outlets, but Tucker Carlson loves her. I'm sitting here every night and has her on all the time, and he's like transfixed. He looks at her like he's hypnotized. Yeah. I don't know why. He just loves her. So I have to ask you a quick thing. There were AOC today, Congresswoman Omar and Congresswoman Tlaib all endorsed Bernie Sanders. Now, that gets some press. I mean, it's an interesting that 3 of the 4 of the squad, and it was trending on Twitter, the Bernie squad. Why does this matter at all on any level?
Well, obviously, you could imagine Warren would have liked those endorsements. These are especially AOC, young, up and coming, very out there candidates who represent the generational change, the progressive wing. But she can live without it, especially if it went to Sanders. And I don't think this is going to boost Sanders in any significant way beyond the people who already love him. And there's probably a way that Warren can use it strategically to separate herself a bit from the progressive wing, even though she's very progressive. There's always ways to do that. I don't think in the end this is a game changer for either candidate. I
hit on the head of the Working Families Party last week. Mm-hmm. And they had endorsed Bernie in 2016, and they voted Liz Warren. Right. And that's significant on some level because they have a grassroots organization around the country. So if AOC would have endorsed Warren, it would have been bigger news.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
Today, I got to play Biden today. Biden took shots at Warren and Sanders over their plans, which is fine, but him invoking Donald Trump, I'm not sure if you heard this, I'm going to play this, invoking Trump and equating them to Trump conmen type of thing, I found troubling. I get it, and I think he's feeling the pressure. Here's clip number 12, please,
It's fascinating that the person who has a plan for everything has no plan for the single most consequential issue in this election in the minds of the American people across the board. And you know, credibility matters. It matters. And the question that I think that Senator Warren is going to have to face, she's going to have to tell the truth, or the question will be raised about whether or not she's going to be candid and honest with the American people. I mean, look, it's not, I don't want to pick on Elizabeth Warren, but this is ridiculous. But Bernie doesn't play for half his plan. He's talking about, 7% on a FICA tax out of your paycheck, another 4%. It doesn't even get you there. And we have to, look, the last thing the Democrats should be doing is playing Trump's game and trying to con the American people to think this is easy. There's nothing easy about it. If you're going to do it, tell us how you're going to do it. It's called truth in speaking.
I was fine with everything except for equating them to conning the American people like Trump. That to me, I was like, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, that's probably a place Biden doesn't want to go. Biden's incredibly vulnerable right now, and generally the Democrats are backing away from the toughest attacks. And to equate this way to sell a package with being Trump is not going to sit well with a lot of Democrats who really despise what Trump stands for in American politics. There's no way to say, certainly, that Senator Warren is somehow just throwing ideas out there. She is a very meticulous thinker. And someone should remind Biden that when Obama sent the ACA plan to Congress, it didn't have any details. He purposely left it vague so that Congress could figure out how to work in his framework, and ultimately got what they got. So it's not so crazy that you wouldn't have every detail laid out either. That's an artificial claim, and I'm not sure it serves him well to go down the Trump route.
No, the minute I heard that, it made my spine. I had a visceral reaction, and not a good one. I'm like, don't do that.
Right. No.
Because And, I have nothing against Biden. I like Biden. There were times in the debate that I saw the Biden that I thought could be impressive at times. And there's other times there was a guy not that impressive. Let me just put it that way. Every now and then there was one moment, even near the end, where he just took a moment and kind of spoke, and it seemed like from his heart. I'm like, that was very good. I'm like, that that his people have to watch that and replicate that Joe Biden as much as possible, because it reminded me of the Biden that so many people liked when he was running with Obama.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I don't know if it's the setting, because when he's more on these one-on-ones or these gaggles, he's much better than on the debate stage. I know the level of pressure is clearly off the wall. You know, in your head, anything I slip up, they're going to come back. There's a narrative. But
you have to compete on that stage. So if he can't deliver there, that's the stage you're going to compete in the fall election as president. So it can't be that those are not going to be part of how you're tested.
How did you view his reaction to Donald Trump's weeks of onslaught about Hunter Biden?
I think it was genuine. It was forceful to say there's nothing wrong, although he contradicted his son a little bit. Mm-hmm. I don't think in the end that will affect what Trump's trying to do. Trump is just trying to dump this story as much as he can and get it out as part of the conversation. He has succeeded. There is no way at this point to really take back just the discussions of something that isn't true or proven, but it's now out there. And so I'm not really sure his denying it at this point will have a great effect. The best thing he could do is shift the conversation to something different. That's really how you get past something like this.
So you wrote for CNN right after the debate talking about foreign policy. It's going to be a bigger issue in this campaign, because up until recently it was not even talked about almost. The debates were like, now foreign policy, the world, sort of like New York One here in New York, like the world in a minute. They have a thing on New York One. It was like the world in 8 minutes. Right. So why the change? What's going on?
Well, I think with foreign policy, you see very clearly what the consequences of a Trumpian presidency are, real consequences. And that's part of what I think led to the reaction that has emerged from Syria, for sure, as well as to the Ukraine scandal and how he uses foreign policy. It's very easy to see what happens when presidential power is used in abusive ways or incorrect ways. And so I don't think Democrats are going to let this go. I think there's a reason his polls have been the way they are and why there's been support for impeachment. And it's different than domestic policy. I think for a lot of Americans, it's scarier to think of an unhinged president who controls troops, who controls nuclear weapons, than something he might do on domestic policy.
Like if he was doing the flip side and just sending our troops everywhere, I think his numbers would go way down, because people would be like, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
I mean, this is insane what's going on. By pulling them back, I mean, I look at Rasmussen poll every day. It's a daily tracking poll. It oversamples Republicans. So it's not accurate for the real world. It is accurate in a way to give a sense this is Trump's favorite poll. And this week it's ticked back up from 45% approval to 50% approval. And what I've found with Trump, and this is anecdotal, but I've found this several times. When that poll goes down, he will flip-flop on an issue. But when that poll goes up or doesn't move, he doubles and triples down. And that's why, like today, the Kurds are no angels, and I don't want Americans killed and all that. He's doubling and tripling down because he believes his base is on board. And there are Democrats who want us out of there as well. There was no Democrat on stage going, let's commit more troops. It was, how do you do it without abandoning your allies? And when you had evangelicals like Pat Robertson, I played the clip slamming Trump on this. That was interesting to me. I'm like, I wonder what's going on here. So I don't know how it's going to play out in the long run. I want to touch, since you've written so much and talked about Watergate, I want to talk about impeachment. And, you know, with Watergate, they had Sam Ervin in the Senate, these televised committee hearings. And that changed public opinion over time. There's no doubt it did. Now the Democrats, since they started the formal impeachment inquiry, almost everything has been behind closed doors. What is the difference between now and Watergate?
Well, that's what happened with Watergate. So in 1973, the Senate has a committee. Sam Ervin is the chair. They hold the televised hearings that many people remember. That was not part of a impeachment process yet. The impeachment process actually starts in 1974. And a lot of the House Judiciary Committee hearings conducted by a guy named Peter Rodino of New Jersey were behind closed doors. Most Republicans wanted that to protect everyone involved and the president. And a lot of Democrats agreed. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And it was done behind closed doors. And slowly bits of it come out. But this is not an unusual thing. And in this case, we're dealing with intelligence and we're dealing with national security policy. And we're also in an atmosphere where a lot's coming out all the time anyway.
Well, they're leaks.
It's leaked more than with Watergate, I would say, in terms of the quantity of information about who testified and what they said. So I understand the frustration, but it is important to remember that's not actually it wasn't all in sunshine for the Watergate hearings.
I will say, before impeachment inquiry began, a lot of us were clamoring for it. We're also making various arguments for it. One was it's the right thing to do with the Constitution, but the other is an intangible but important, which is driving media narratives. Mm-hmm. And these leaks, even though we're not seeing it, are driving media narratives. They're driving Trump crazy at the same time. Yeah. He's not controlling many of the media narratives surrounding this. Calling this fake news or a witch hunt or Republicans saying we're not going to cooperate, getting no traction anywhere. The things that are, like tomorrow, Gordon Sandlin, the ambassador, is going to testify. I don't know if it'll all be behind closed doors, but I'm sure we're going to hear about it pretty quickly afterwards, what he said. So that's effective. What would you think of, I've had various members of Congress on the last few weeks talking about the inherent power of Congress to arrest people. Mm-hmm. And I'm working on an article right now that the House Democrats they must arrest Rudy Giuliani, because he's not even the executive branch. He's the perfect person. He's disregarded subpoena. You arrest him and you hold him in some cell somewhere. I'm not sure where you build. It could be at Pelosi's back room, in a closet. I don't even care. What's the potential downside, would you say, to that happening?
The downside is the arms war of doing this down the line, that this will be a power invoked by many legislators in the future. And all of a sudden we have Congress arresting people as part of the new partisan warfare. So that's a danger when you do something like that. And I could imagine it playing out that way. I don't think Pelosi's instinct is going to be to do something like that. She is hesitant. But he is going to force them to think about it more than anyone, as the whole administration. They are stonewalling this investigation as much as possible, and they are forcing Congress to ask this question: what do you do when the executive branch, when the White House literally says your process isn't even legitimate? Then it's like, what happens next moment? And that's why this is now part of the conversation. I don't know what's going to happen, though.
Well, Congressman Gallego was on Ruben Gallego, and he said what he really favors is fining people. And he goes, that's sort of a midway thing. You're not taking their liberty.
That's the Trump sweet spot, too.
Right. You put a fine on Rudy of $100,000 for every day you don't give us the documents. Then he can litigate that. Now, I think as a practical matter, look, I looked it up. The Congressional Research Service has a great article about the inherent power of Congress to arrest people. It's clearly there. It's not been overturned. They could do it. There's a procedure for it. They have to have a vote of the committee or the full Congress. Yep. They go get the person. I imagine that person will then get counsel who will make an immediate emergent application to a federal court to be released. You're taking someone's liberty. Because my concern in the big picture is due process. Like if you're just elected officials who might be partisan hacks, whoever they are, going, put these people in jail, put them in jail. There's no due process procedure. It's very concerning. So the person will apply immediately to court. They will have an expedited hearing that day probably on, is there due process? Is there a way to appeal? How do you do this? We'll finally get a procedure in place then, because there's procedural due process and there's substantive due process. Not to get into, but procedural is simply, here's an appeal process. You can make this appeal. You have a day to do it, whatever it might be. I would think a court would demand the procedural due process.
Yeah, I just can't imagine going down this path. And Trump would love this. This he would love. I mean, I've always said fears of a backlash are totally overblown and misplaced, and I think that's what's happening. But if Congress is arresting people and there's questions about due process, I think Pelosi is going to back away from that fast and furious.
Well, I'm trying to get my friend Congressman Andre Carson on the show. He was not available this week. He's a big guy. I was going to ask him. He would do the arresting. So I'm like, come on, you could do this. He worked in Homeland Security in his state of Indiana before he got elected to Congress. There are some bigger members of Congress, I think, that can do them. Veterans. Seth Moulton.
I mean, look, the reason this is so big, it is raising the question of what power does Congress have when a president is willing to ignore the whole institution. That's basically what's going on right now. All presidents exercise and flex their muscle, but this is something different in terms of just denying the legitimacy of basic processes altogether. And so that's why we're even asking the question. That's the big issue that's emerged in the last few months.
It's like a king. I mean, if tomorrow, and I keep saying this, if you're ever surprised by what Trump does, you're not paying attention. It's your fault. If tomorrow Trump signed an executive order dissolving Congress, like a king, a monarch would do in countries. I've been in Jordan where they dissolved the parliament. The king signed it and no more parliament. I would not be stunned because then he'd go, well, the courts will decide.
Yep.
You know, I dissolved you. You're a legitimate Congress. His letter is essentially saying you don't have any power to Congress. He essentially dissolved Congress with that letter. I mean, I'm not kidding. When you say it's illegitimate, I've deemed it illegitimate, I'm not going to respond. How is it different than a monarch going, I dissolved the parliament?
Well,
Done.
That's why we are in an impeachment process. I think when you have a president who thinks that way, it will almost inevitably lead you here because it will manifest itself in real decisions that he made. And that is what we have now learned. It's exactly what he did with Ukraine. He saw no restraints on what he could do. He didn't believe there were any obstacles to his flexing his power to achieve and get what he wants. And so this is where we are right now.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll come back and talk about the 2020 race. Both new polls on Trump in certain battleground states really underwater, like really crazily underwater. And of course that can change. But also the 2020 Democrats. Do the second and third tier candidates have any realistic chance at this point? I mean, we are 110 days from Iowa. I mean, some of them are running out of money, which is a big article in Politico today. And that's the death knell. You run out of money, there's nothing you can do. So let's take a break and come back right after this.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. New perspectives, important voices, influential ideas. This is the Dean Obadala Show on SiriusXM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show, live Wednesday, October 16th, here with our friend Julian Zelizer from CNN, professor at Princeton University. So let's talk about politics here, the politics of everything we're seeing. 2020 Democrats, first of all. A new poll today, Economist, has Warren up by 3, I think, over Biden. But clearly it is interchangeable almost. Warren, Biden, Bernie, very, very close there.
Yeah.
In all likelihood, do those 3 just fight it out through the spring? And a 4th could join them. But do you think in all likelihood that's what we're going to see, a fight through the spring?
Yes, certainly a fight through the spring. I don't know who's in the fight. I think the 3 of them, assuming Sanders is healthy and can get back on the trail, none of them are going to quit anytime soon. If any of the 3 really quit, that would have a big impact. It would actually be Biden.
Exactly.
If for some reason he says, I'm out of this, it's too much, then I could imagine there's some space for some of these other candidates to make a real play, because they would all be the non-Sanders/Warren alternative. And so I think that's why they're staying in. A lot of them have a lot of money. Buttigieg has a huge campaign, so they're not. It's not impossible, and they're all looking for those early victories. I think this will be a momentum-building primary caucus season, meaning 2 early victories can really help whoever it is create the sense they are the electable ones.
You know, many of the pundits on TV will look back at 2008, or especially look at, for Democrats, they'll look at 2004 a lot, the last time there was a lot of big field. Are they instructive at all in the world we live in today?
No, I think it's changed. I think the media has certainly changed so much. Just the vastness of it, the easiness to get messages out, and for candidates to break through, even if they don't have as much money as other candidates. I think that's really changed. And the parties are simply not operating the same way they were just 10 or 15 years ago. So I don't think we can make assumptions based on that at all. The one lesson, though, that is important is organization matters. And so it's not just that Warren is doing well with polls. She has built a really strong network in these states. That's hard to replicate quickly. That's why there's only a few like a Buttigieg who actually can compete on that field.
There was an article in Politico today about money, about people running out of money. And it's, as you would imagine, it's the lower tier candidates. But you think you can stay in on a shoestring just and hope for the best? But look, Iowa is a caucus state. That's all about building a structure to get people to come out and stand there for as many hours as demanded to be part of this. That is really, you're turning out your people. It cannot just be Facebook ads.
Yeah.
You got to go out there and do that. I mean, do you think they just stay in anyway?
By Super Tuesday, that falls away. You need money. You can't campaign in all these big states without a lot of money. And so I do think the shoestring budget, you might be able to do a kind of Beto O'Rourke type campaign, but that's really hard at this stage. And with such competitive candidates, it might be wide open, but you have some very strong candidates, Biden, Warren, Sanders. So you need some dollars for that.
I could see, if people recall 2008, not that long ago, people might not recall the details in that Obama and Hillary went through the entire spring. Edwards was gone. To remind people, in Iowa, Hillary came in 3rd. It was Obama, then John Edwards, and then Hillary. It was very close. And then Hillary goes on to win New Hampshire, and then they're off. The race is off. At some point, Edwards goes away the side. He's gone. And there were other candidates in 2008, folks, that are like our 1%ers, like Joe Biden, who did horrific in Iowa and dropped right out. But if you look at Hillary and Obama, they were well-funded campaigns. They went through, she didn't drop out until, was it around May or June? That long.
Yep.
So if these 3 top-tier candidates, if no one else joins, just assuming for this conversation, no one else joins, they all have their money, they were able to raise money pretty well, this could be a fight between 3 candidates where no one getting close to what you need in terms of delegates to win outright. They could go the dream match to the convention. Every political pundit's dream is that it's at the convention and it's smoke-filled rooms and people behind back door. It's remarkable to read about what happened in 68 and 64, just the talk behind the scenes of what was going on. Not 64 as much as 68 and 60.
Yeah, it could happen this time. And we had it in 1976 in the Republican convention. It was Ford who was president and Reagan. and there was a lot of wheeling and dealing going into the convention. In 1980, there was talk that Ted Kennedy was going to try to take delegates and pass this rule which would allow them to vote for whoever they wanted. But and there's always talk, like you said, pundits always want this
It's a dream.
But this is the first time it could. I mean, you have a number of candidates who don't want to back out of this. They believe the stakes are enormous, so that's going to move them. They have pretty strong support, all of them, in different ways. And the rules have changed, I believe, in the Democratic Party so that I'm not sure, I don't know the exact rules, but I think it's going to be a many
less superdelegates now. So you've got that's gone. I
so
mean, there are
going to be
some
a lot of
much
roll
less.
call votes, and that could it could either be exciting or for the party it could be devastating.
Well,
if
we're
this
supposed to be there. I mean, our whole channel will be there in Milwaukee in next summer, covering it. Since I'm the last show here, who knows? We'll do special coverage through the night probably. If there's like 5 roll call votes, I mean, there are famous conventions. Was it '68 where won the nomination so late in the night and they go give a speech like at 12:30 in the morning?
Yeah.
Was that '68?
Chicago might have been. That's when Humphrey wins.
Right.
That's the famous Chicago convention where there's all the protests, and it's late, but I don't remember.
So let's talk about Donald Trump. I mean, I saw a poll today from North Carolina. I sent it to you. Donald Trump in North Carolina, his approval rating has slipped from March of 44% in North Carolina, folks, which is to say it's purple is not really. There's a Democratic governor now, but it's really a red state. It slid to 39% in the brand new poll. And among Republicans, he dropped from 86% to 74%. If nothing else matters, if he loses GOP support, is that when his political mortality becomes potentially on? I mean, do you think, is that too much to hope for?
That's a lot to hope for. I think we've learned he's been unpopular, and yet Republicans have stood by him politically.
But what about this? No, but he's dropped from 86 to 74% in the same polling in a few months. If that, at what point would that have to actually get to where they sincerely, the power brokers sincerely think about replacing him on the ballot?
Oh, replacing him on the ballot? I don't think that's going to happen.
Not possible.
I mean, I think what I was thinking is that's when the Senate Republicans, some of them start to turn on him and say, let's remove him from office. They would support impeachment. But that's what they're looking for.
But what about that? What about where they want him gone? They know he's going to drag the party down, and Republicans, a la Barry Goldwater in 73 and 74, going to Nixon. That's their way of doing it. Not like we're going to have a convention fight. Right. Like they go to him, go, look, there's enough votes here to remove you. Do you want to be the first president in the history of the republic removed? Or do you want to step down and let Pence and Mother be on the ticket?
It's a fascinating question. I don't know. You're referring to this moment when a group of Republicans told Nixon, you don't have the votes in the Senate, you're done. And at least according to what we know, that's really what turned Nixon and said, I'm done and I'm going to step down. But would Trump respond that way, or would he say, get out of here, close the door and go after them? I don't know if he responds to those rational kind of arguments, but it's all about this political and public opinion. That's what's going to move Republicans.
In the 3 key states that Trump won by about 77,000 votes, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, without them, he's not president. The brand new polls, I just looked at them today, battleground polls. Michigan, 43% approval rating, 53% disapprove. Pennsylvania, 45% approval, 52% disapprove. Wisconsin, 43% approval, 54% disapprove. Even Ohio, which he won pretty easily, he's down 46% to 51%. These things move. Right. I get it. There's no candidate against him. It's not a binary choice scenario. But if you're a Republican, because Trump's oblivious to the world, but if you're a real Republican as part of the apparatus of their party, these numbers aren't good. This has got to be concerning.
He's a weak president. He is now a weak president running for re-election, and you would put him in the category of the one-term presidents in terms of what is likely to happen. All the polls are pretty consistent on that. The question is, what happens in the fall if he's still in office when he combines presidential power, Trumpian campaign politics against a single person? And does that change? Can he devastate a person so badly using the Justice Department, using social media ads, that the conversation we're having now about these polls will be irrelevant? And that's serious. That is how he'll run. And Democrats should not imagine anything different.
Oh, it's going to be a horror. It's going to be things I've said things we can't think of that because we're not sociopaths and we're not psychopaths. And to stay in power, he'll do anything. And
Well, look at Ukraine. That is the story of Ukraine. Part of this is how he's going to run his campaign. He will lean on foreign governments to dig up the dirt, and he will withhold money. So that's just a taste. It's a sample of what's on the menu
and
for
he's
dinner.
so brazen. He released loosely what's known as a transcript of that call,
Right.
thinking and going, I'm exonerated. Like Bill Barr had the bullshit with Bill Barr.
Right.
Like that's how brazen. Like, is he that? And now we're going to find out tomorrow, folks, which I knew, but Gordon Sondland, if it's the reporting is correct, is going to testify that text message he sent, that there's no quid pro quo back to Bill Taylor was dictated by Trump, but dictated by his lawyers, because if you go through them, it's laughable. The rest of the text messages are like normal text messages, like, sure, call me, that kind of stuff. This one is like a paragraph. As you know, Bill, there is no quid pro quo. It went on, I think you should call Lisa or whatever. I'm like, this is a lawyer letter that someone sent. He copied and pasted and then texted it 5 hours later. Tomorrow will be interesting. And again, that's in my understanding behind closed doors. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back last few minutes here with our friend Julian Zelizer.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
Back to the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress.
And welcome back. Dean Obadala Show. We're live here with Julian Zelizer. We were just talking here that, I'm not kidding, I was telling Julian, I would like Trump removed, and I'll deal with Mike Pence. And it's not political. It's really my concern for this country, what Trump's going to put us through as a nation between now and November 2020. And we can't even guess. Anything you say, nothing is wrong. I mean, nothing is wrong because he would do it and can do it. And What do you think the worst case about Bill Barr using the DOJ to open criminal investigations into his opponents, like we're third world?
A year ago, I wouldn't have necessarily said that would happen, but now it's totally plausible. And that combined with using the apparatus of foreign policy to try to undercut the election. And then just a very basic thing is social media doctored videos. I feel like that's a big frontier. Totally fake videos of whoever the opponent is doing all sorts of things in ways that are hard to take back. I think those are the three areas. But if I'm imagining them, that means there's probably like 5 other things that we're not even thinking of that are on the table.
What makes some of this worse, that Facebook has said they will accept ads that are factually incorrect, and because it's politics. And look, I understand opinion things. That's fine. But if something is like, so that means they can run an ad that Joe Biden was convicted of a crime in 1983 and just literally lie. And so they're going to run it. That's a disservice to our democracy. That is like adding Russian ads. So,
and Fox News, don't forget the power that could have in this election too.
And Megyn Kelly's back on Fox News right now, Over Your Shoulder, her first interview since leaving. Julian, thank you for coming. Follow Julian on Twitter. It's at Julian Zelizer.
At Julian Zelizer.
Watch him, read his articles. They come out hourly on CNN. They're great articles. Thank you, my friend.
Thank
Be
you.
back tomorrow. All new show. I think Congressman Joe Kennedy's going to be here. First time since he announced for Senate. It's going to be on the show and more. Be back tomorrow. Have a great night. Thanks for tuning in. I'm on Twitter. I'm Needy at Dino Vidal. Have a great night.
Good night.